Boston. Kind of weird that you noticed you didn't recognize me until I said the name. I didn't recognize myself. Last week I looked in the mirror and I said, Dad? You know, although now I look in the mirror and I say, Grandpa? But you know, a day like this makes us all feel young again, doesn't it? It takes us back to that fabulous 60s and how much fun we had. I had Jan and Dean on the show many, many times, as most of you know. And I just wanted to share one story with you. I had kind of an open door policy on the show. Our show was live every day. And there was a studio door, and people would just come walking through it. Different record promoters would bring their acts in. One day the Supremes might walk in, or Sonny and Cher, or the Beach Boys. You know, Brian Wilson broke in one day because I had the Four Freshmen on, and he wanted to meet him, and he'd been watching at home and got in his car and drove down and got there too late. They had all gone. He burst open the door and said, "Are they still here?" And I said, "No, they just left." And you know, of course, he'd having so much of his harmonies after the Four Freshmen that he had never met them, and he missed out. But I think the most exciting time was, this was about 3 or 4 months after Jan's accident. The door opened, right in the middle of the show, and Jan and Dean came down. And it was like one of the first times that Jan had really come out. He was still pretty busted up, but he had a smile on his face. It wasn't too easy for him to talk at the time, but he came down because he wanted to let everybody know that he was okay. And that really made me feel good, and it made everybody else. He didn't want to go on television. He just wanted me to say that he's here in the studio and he's okay. And so I got on, and they said, he's here in the studio and he's okay, and everybody cheered, and it was great. And that was just one of the many, many memories that I wanted to pass on to you. And we will miss our wonderful Jan. However, I can always lip sync his records and keep him alive. Thank you very much for coming down, and thank you for giving me a couple minutes up here. Thank you.
Hello, this is Jim Pewter, and I just wanted to tell you a couple of things, memories of Jan. It was about 2 years ago. I was over at Jan's house with Gertie and my friend Alan Wilson, and we were having dinner. And halfway through the dinner, I started humming the song from a rare Jan and Dean single that came out in '60. I think it was a flip of Clementine, "You're on My Mind." And I started singing the melody line. And Jan looked over to me, started smiling. He picked it up, started singing it all the way through, never missed a beat, knew every word. And we both laughed. And Gertie and Alan looked over to us and said, "Where did that song come from?" I said, "It's one of those rare 45s that Jan and I remember." And Alan says, "Oh yeah, now it comes to mind." But it was amazing on that time how he remembered every word of that song that he probably hadn't heard since probably 1960 or 61. Another quick story. Back in 1975 and 6, Jan and I and Alan Wilson were writing songs together, and I was living in the Hollywood Hills, and Jan would come over for writing sessions. And the front of our home had about 60 steps, cement steps, and Jan would come over, and the first time he climbed all the steps, and I said, "Jan, next time you come over to my house, we have a driveway, just pull in the back, you come in the back door, you don't have to climb any steps." We did 4 or 5 more sessions, he kept climbing the steps. I said, "Jan, why are you doing that? Just go to the driveway in the back." He says, put his hand on my shoulder, looked me in the eyes, he says, "Jimmy," he says, "I need the exercise." So that was Jan, and we'll never forget him, and what an inspiration he was to me, and what great times we had, and the music will live on, and I miss him a lot. And that's it. God bless you.
My name is Jan. My name is Jan Eric. and that part of the family that came from Norway back in the early days, emigrated here to the United States in 1964, and met Jan and Dean, and got to know Jan in only a short period of time before the accident. I lived with the Berry family, and if you can imagine, which is pretty hard, but it took to survive, not speaking the language too well, for one, and living with all those Jan's sisters and brothers. I can tell you about that later on if you stop me. But it was an interesting period. But one of the things that brought some memory to me is that Mr. Berry himself, and he's sitting over here, by the way, he taught me how to make Mai Tais. Jan loved Mai Tais. Here starts the story because after Jan's accident, and Dean, you're here to verify some of this, only because I was asked to live with Jan at his new house up in Mulholland Drive to kind of keep an eye on Jan. And believe me or not, I had to keep an eye on myself more so after I met some of his friends over time. But one evening, I was there alone in the house. Jan was in the hospital getting some tests and whatnot. And I was there behind his bar, and if some of you remember his house up in Mulholland Drive, you open that door, and at the end of this enormous open space, walking through carpeting and the fireplace in the middle, was this bar. And I've been working on my Mai Tai recipes. But I was totally alone, here with Jan's bar, all the gold, silver records on top. Felt like, hey, I need some action here. Guess what happened? Knock on the door. I walked across, opened the door. Two young, beautiful ladies had driven all the way across the country to meet Jan and see how his condition was. And they asked, is Jan here? Hey, hi, Jan. They looked at me and I looked at them and said, you gotta be thirsty after that long a trip. And so, come on in. I invited them over to the bar. Hey, over there. I said, okay, we are thirsty. What are you making? Mai Tai. Special, strong Mai Tais. I was over there, helped these two young ladies up on the bar stools. And those of you that remember, they're pretty tall bar stools. And sitting around that bar, I was in control, and I felt, hey, pretty damn good. Jan, my record sound, behind me here, these two ladies looking at me, and I say, I don't care what Jan this is, we're having a good time. Now, I think I have the story right here because my daughter, my first wife, and current wife is back here. So I'm going to leave this rest of the story to your imagination. And again, I'll be roaming around. The sad thing about this whole thing is that, well, that's a memory for me, but the sad thing about this is that I met this wonderful person. And he passed on and lived, unfortunately, a life the last, 35, 40 years. Too bad his family didn't come express himself better to all of us. So I'm here to celebrate with you.
We're 2/3 of the Honeys.
I'm Diana. This is Ginger.
And on behalf of Marilyn as well.
And we just wanted to kind of give a little insight on, obviously everybody knows that we've known Jan and Dean since, I don't want to say forever, but I was probably 2.
As you were just, we had you in a pram.
Anyway,
We had fun times with Jan and Dean, and we had lots of fun. I don't know if any of you know, but we did, a lot of songs with them. One of note is New Girl in School. We sang background, and we spent a lot of time after hours. We'd go to the Pancake House on Hollywood Boulevard, which was infamous at that time, and we'd
I'm letting her talk.
We'll let Diane talk in just
Oh,
a
no,
minute.
it's okay.
Anyway, we spent a lot of time with him, and one of the fun things is Jan's roving eye. Sorry, Gertie. He was young then, but little did anybody know that he wanted to be a doctor,
A gynecologist.
So
We got the insight. Every time he looked at a girl, or every time we'd be somewhere,
Yeah.
he'd be roving, and we'd be laughing.
yeah, it was a lot of fun. We had wonderful memories, and up until the 90s, we were fortunate to do the surf bash with them. I think it was around 94, 95. With I think it was 95 with Janet Dean. We came up and sang a few songs like "Be True to Your School," which we did with the Beach Boys, and Jan, and also
I'll just let her talk. It's good.
New Girl in School. And Diane has some funny thing to tell you.
It's just, I don't know if a lot of people know that originally we kind of convinced Jan and Dean to do
Surf
Surf
City.
City. And Brian originally wrote it and came to us and said, I've got this really great song I want you to do, and blah, 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 blah. And we said, oh, that's really good. And he said, but, I played it for Jan and Dean, and they don't really want to do it. We went, oh, well, okay.
Well, we'll do it.
We'll do it. And on one of the things, I'll give you a little insight, when it says, and when we get to Surf City, we'll be shooting the curl and checking out a party for a surfer girl. Originally, he wrote, and when we get to Surf City, we'll be riding the tides and checking out the parties for some surfer guys. So it was,
A stroke of
we
love.
really convinced them to do it, and Dean, we're still waiting for our mini. We're still waiting for our mini. Anyway, no, we love it, and we're happy that they did it,
And we'll miss Jan
we'll miss
terribly.
Jan
His
really,
spirit,
really
his sense of
a
humor,
lot.
was brilliant. Brilliant
And
sense
we
of humor.
feel, like it was, I really have to say, like it was one of, Brian was my brother-in-law, and we were with Jan so much that it was really, really like family. And it's kind of hard, but we know that this memory is carried on, and we love you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I guess it doesn't come off. Well, anyway, my name is Jeannie Stoutberg, and I've known Jan since he was 8 years old, and his mother and father for 52 years. And when... Let me turn this down. I need to see you. There we go. Thank you. Anyway, when Jan was 17, he was like most kids, and he got into trouble from time to time. So little Bill called Frank and me, and they said, we're having a little trouble with Jan. How about we send him up to you for a while? We lived in South San Francisco, up near San Francisco, California. And so we said, well, okay, that's great. Send him on up. So Jan came up, and he went to South City High School. And they discovered there that he tested in the top 2% of all students who had ever been tested on nationwide tests. So he was a pretty sharp guy. And being a teenager, he got a job there working at the caddy, and he'd go to school, and after school he'd work in the golf course. And then we'd go home for the evening, and this went on for several months, and everything was fine. And then all of a sudden, Jan said, I want to go to that dance over in Oakland. And my husband and I both knew that Oakland was not the best place to go for a dance. So we said, no, Jan, you can't go. And he said, I'm going anyway. And so what resulted because of that is Jan got sent home. And after he got home, he wasn't happy, and so he dyed his hair black. He came back to South San Francisco and went to the school there for a while until he finally decided he'd go back home. So anyway, that was just something I wanted to share with you about Jan's life. Thank you.
Hello. Good evening. I'm Elliot Kendall, and thank you.
About 10 years ago, I had the pleasure of interviewing both Jan and Dean and Arnie Ginsberg, Joe Lubin, and Lou Adler, who's very kindly donated the club and the usage of all this tonight. And I had the best time interviewing Jan. Jan, at that time, not many people were interviewing Jan, and I think they were afraid that maybe, you know, he wouldn't be detailed or he wouldn't remember. And my personal experience was, if you took your time with Jan, he was fine, and he would recall great detail. I'm going to show you, these are very small, but this is the CD that I had the pleasure of doing the reissue production on. It's Jan and Dean Teen Suite. Dean Torrence did the cover art, the gorgeous cover art, and Joe Lubin at the time, who was their producer with Arwen Records, gave me a tape that he found in his closet from 1957 that had Jan doing a pretend fake radio show. So at the end of this CD, and this is not a pitch to buy the CD, but the CD I think is still available, probably Amazon.com, and I don't have a point on the record, by the way. But if you get to track 22, there's a wonderful rare tape of Jan in the studio playing with his Ampex tape deck and switching the echo on and off. You know about that. And then there's also a collage where it slips into where he had this fake radio show. My understanding was he'd send these tapes around to various record companies and get free 45s. So Jan, you know, had this pretend radio show he was doing out of his garage in Bel Air. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then the further story goes that Dean says that they go through all the 45s that they got from the record companies, and the lousy ones they take and they throw off into some big ravine out in Bel Air. So per Dean, there's some canyon in Bel Air with a ton of old vintage 45s probably smashed to bits. But I also wanted to say that in terms of a producer, and I think Jan said something to Larry King to this effect, and I think maybe some of you have read it in the paper, but Jan should be remembered as an innovator. I mean, this is a man who is an architect of the California sound. He went from literally the garage to United Western Studio in like the span of, what am I thinking, 5 years? So here's a kid, you know, an enthusiastic, ambitious, type A, pre-med student. Imagine being Jan juggling all these different hats at the time. I mean, he's pre-med, he's going to college, and he's a rock star. I mean, usually a rock star thing is like a full-time gig, you know, it takes everything in your entire power. So I just think in terms of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I mean, everybody knows that Jan belongs there. I think everyone in this room truly believes that he does. So maybe a bit of applause for that cause. Rock and Roll Hall of Fame producer. I have a little bit of influence. My day job is I work for Universal Music in Santa Monica, and I do radio marketing for the catalog division. Enough about me. So I took some notes. It's also interesting to note that Jan Berry, along with Brian Wilson, bucked the early studio system. So you had your record company, especially in Brian's case with Capitol, saying, record in our studio, use our producers, use our engineers. Jan and Brian would have none of that. They said, no, we're going to hire the best studio cats, including Hal Blaine and Earl Palmer, Tommy Tedesco, Glenn Campbell, the list goes on. Obviously utilizing Bones Howe, Maggie Lindstrot, all those wonderful, Lou Adler, of course, being in the chair there. And I don't think enough can be said about what Lou Adler and Herb Alpert did in the early years. A little bit of applause for Lou and Herb. And these guys were visionaries. Imagine the excitement of early rock and roll. You're Jan Berry, you've got Dean, the perfect comic foil, you're surrounded by all this great talent. When I was 16, growing up in Berkeley, California, I put on the earphones and listened to those incredible productions in stereo. To me, they were almost cinematic. Especially the way Jan would utilize the cymbal, you know, be like, shh, grab your board and go. Every time they used one of those little production tricks, I think everybody else in the business was taking note. Jan would double the vocals, so you hear all the vocals doubled. If you listen to stereo, you throw on the headphones, you listen to Honolulu Lulu, all those incredible productions. And of course, everyone knows that Jan was a great arranger. I mean, Jan could write out horn charts even as recently as 3 years ago, which is what Gary Griffin was telling me. Jan was still writing those incredible horn charts. So I just wanted to end up the whole chat here by saying, when I interviewed Jan, at his house maybe about 8, 9 years ago for this Teen Suite CD. he was so lovely, and literally like said, no, sit, have a seat, and he went around the corner on his own, brought back the Jamba Juice smoothies, brought back the Noah's bagels, am I right? I mean, this is the kind of hospitality the guy would show us. And then we sat down and I showed him the great Alan Clark books, and every time he'd see a photograph, he would remember, and remember very clearly. He'd go, I remember that was with Roger Christian at POP, and that concert was this. He remembered everything if you showed him visuals. One of the other sweet, poignant things that Jan told me, and then I'll get off, was he mentioned to me the accident was God's way of telling him to slow down. And he said it with a big grin on his face. I mean, this is a man who, through tremendous adversity, always kept a grin, always had time to sign everything for the fans. And again, you know, one mark here, one check mark for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for Jan Perry. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Don Peake. I'm one of the guitar players that played with Jan's band. And I wasn't going to get up here, but my wife kicked me in the shin and said, I want to tell you a couple things about Jan. We played together on the records with Bones Howe, United Western, before the accident. And then we found out about the accident. And we went over to UCLA, and we would sit downstairs. Hal Blaine and I and a couple other guys would sit downstairs and wait for Jan to come out of the coma. And when Jan woke up, we all went upstairs, and he looked at me and he said, Don, get me some music paper. And I went and got some score paper because he wanted to write something out. That was right after he woke up. About 3-4 months later, he walked over to my house and rang the bell at 2 in the morning. And he had a piece of score paper clutched under his arm, and he wanted to talk about the ways he'd forgotten some of the names for the notation. Jan was a musical heavyweight. He was a real musician. He was a tremendous driving force. We played on those concerts. I played with him in San Diego with those great concerts when Dean would ride the skateboard across the stage. So I just want to say God bless you, Jan. God bless the family. I remember the Corvette. It was smashed. You can't believe anybody even survived that crash. So thank you and bye. Hey.
My name is John Venable, and I'm not in the music business, but I have known Jan Berry and Dean Torrence pretty much all my life. I started knowing Dean first when we were in grade school, who was known as Dino at that time. And then met Jan, and we formed a little high school club called the Barons. And the Roxy is a very appropriate place on the Strip, because I don't know if Ryan's here tonight, but Ryan O'Neill and Jan and a few of us would pile in my car and come up and cruise the Strip looking for girls, and usually end up getting in a fist fight with somebody. But probably my most cherished memories are when we were in high school. All the guys in my club would come to school with nickels. Yeah, it was a nickel at that time to make a phone call. And we would call the disc jockeys and say, please play these records constantly, hour after hour after hour, which had paid off. And Mark, who was the previous speaker, alluded to, there really was a K-Jan studio, which was in the garage, which was where all of our parties were. And thank God for Claire Berry. She took a lot of us, sobered us up, got us home safely. But the most fun was we had a 25-year reunion. And I actually twisted Arn Ginsberg's arm to come down to be with all of us for this reunion. And the fun thing was, it was planned to be in the garage. And 2 days before this, we were going through all the catering and so forth, and Claire Berry called me and said, John, you're all over 40, you can use the whole house.
sounds like 4 people know who I am. I'm Paul Morantz. I wrote the story for Rolling Stone on Dead Man's Curve and then the movie Dead Man's Curve. It was nice to come down here and see the Papa Duran Dean and remember all those days after the movie, actually. Come back together again and to see kids of all different generations. Even my own son, when he was, I guess, about 8 years old, I remember driving down to San Diego when they were performing in San Diego and seeing him getting into the surf music and realizing that this was music that would last for every generation, even when we're all gone. That music will still be here. And there's not many musicians who can say that. You know, there's the Beatles, Beach Boys, Jan and Dean. There's not a whole lot that we can say that music will be there forever. And so stepping up here when some of Papa Duran's suggested I do so, trying to think what I would say, I actually heard the person on stage say what I would say, and that is that they belong in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Whatever anyone can do to get them there, you know, maybe Lou Adler has the power to make that push. I don't know. Last, I haven't seen a lot of people here in quite a few years. Those of you that I have seen again, it's good to see you all. It's great to see Dean, to finally see that he has kids instead of dating them.
I gotta cover my ass now. Thanks, Paul. It's gonna be a long ride back to Huntington Beach. Well, heck, I've been standing over trying to figure out what story do you start with, or what do you end up? I mean, Lou only gave us this for another couple hours. So it would actually take days. I know a bunch of us over here going through our own stories. I guess, you know, maybe you'd start chronologically. The first time that I was aware of who Jan was I happened to be in a geometry class at Uni High. Obviously, I wasn't paying any attention. And I was sitting there and looking out the window, as I often did. I'd much rather be outside, out there on the lawn. And I'm looking at well, I didn't have a watch, so I was probably looking at the clock going, when is this damn class going to be over? Kept looking out the window, and all of a sudden I see this guy walking down the street. He was on the other side of the fence, which meant he was outside the class. He was outside the school. And I knew he was a student because, you know, he was a teenager type. And in those days, you actually had to go to school. So I was going like, what is that fella doing out there? And as he gets a little bit closer, I see he's wearing a gray jacket. As John Venable pointed out, a bunch of us were barons. I wasn't a baron at that particular time, but I knew who the barons were. I mean, they were pretty cool guys. So he was wearing a gray baron's jacket. So I said, okay, that for sure is a student, and it's a baron. And as he got closer, oh, it's that blonde guy. Yeah, I think I've heard of him. So I tapped a classmate of mine and said, you know, who is that? I think, you know, I kind of recognize him. He said, oh, that's Jan Berry. I would figure he'd be outside, you know, out in the street, walking down. He's going down to Frosty Freeze. While the rest of us were in class, and I'm scratching my head going, how do you do that? Why should he be out there and us in here? And I thought, this is a real mystery, and someday I'm going to have to find out. He gets a little bit closer and then passes by, and I see the guy's smoking a cigar.
I said, this is one guy I do have to meet, and luckily I did. Thank you very much, and whoever's next here. Thank you all for coming.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, at this time, we do have something very special for you. We are going to invite up as many of the Jan and Dean band guys that are here, and Dean, to join us in a little celebration of Jan's music. Before you leave today, you will get, as a gift, thank you for coming, a Janberry. It's this very special CD. It's the last CD that Jan worked on. She'll be getting one of those when you leave as well. So at this time, I'd like to invite up as many of the Jan and Dean band guys. Not all of them, you don't have to. And then what we're going to do is, there's so many amazing musicians here that once we get into a couple of songs, come on up, join in, give somebody a tap on the shoulder, and just have a good time. Thanks.
All right, everybody got their whoopee whistles ready? There are two groups of people here tonight, those that knew Jan and were involved in his life in the early days during their first run of hits. And then those of us who got to know Jan during kind of the second wave of his career with Dean. And all of us who are musicians in that crowd owe a debt of gratitude to everyone who was involved in making those records, the producers and musicians, and especially Jan for writing the songs and making those records hits. And one of the artifacts from Jan's later life was the whoopee whistle. It was just one of his idiosyncrasies, like Mars for You on his license plate. But he loved these things, and so I just want to offer a short prayer, and then after the amen, or in conjunction with, just give Jan a send-off with the whoopee whistle. Father, I just want to offer a note of thanks to Jan and his family for all the contributions that he made and all the inspiration that he gave to everyone whose life was touched by him. There were many people that came to his concerts who had physical difficulties, who were inspired by his gumption to get up there and keep singing. And there were a lot of people who were inspired by his music, whether they knew Jan personally or knew his story at all. And I pray for peace to be with Gertie and to be with Bill and Clara and all of Jan's family, who were all such a blessing to him in his life. In Jesus' name, amen. Great idea. We got a song to dedicate to Jan to start things off. Kelsey, we need you for this one thing. Come on, please, we need your vocal.
Yeah. What? Well, we'll find out.
Jan.
Some glad morning when this gig is over, I'll surf away in morning rain. On God's lesser shore, I'll surf away, surf away. I'll surf away, oh glory, I'll surf away in morning. Tide is high, Cowabunga in the sky. I'll surf away,
We'll practice that someday.
Come on, guys. Let's go.
Here we go, 1, 2.
Do-run-de-run-de, do-run-de-run-de, do-run.
he sang on the record.
Thank you, honeys. You guys have any requests? We'll try to do them. Hey, Cass, where are you? We need you, man. Come back up. Get away from my wife.
And mine. He's one of those guys, you know.
John Castle, ladies and gentlemen. Long-time Janet Dean band member. Ba 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 da da ma ma. All right. Da da ma ma. Ba 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 da da ma ma.
I am only 5 years old and my baby 3, but I know that she's a girl just the way you see. When I say I love her, she replies to me. Puts me to say she loves me.
Baby talk.
To say she loves me. She can love me very well. Everybody knows. She sure looks well in her baby clothes. I asked her if her love is true, and she owned up. Puts me to say she loves me. I'll tell the world that I love her so. And if she wants to be my girl, I'll never let her go. She will say to me when I kiss her on the cheek, oh so tender. Although I'm only 5 years old, she is only 3. I really love my baby. Love my baby. All together, 1, 2,
Dean has a request, so we're gonna do it.
Yeah, I like to hear John sing this particular song. John, by the way, has been with the Beach Boys for the last minute and a half. It's about as long as I was with them.
John Wilson.
Hey, it's actually a Wilson. So now, I'm requesting this. It may not make any sense, but I like to hear him sing. Come on, Rhonda. And by the way, these are sing-alongs, folks.
All right, get those hands together. Since you put me down, I've been out to and in my head. I believe this night and the morning I'll be laying in bed. Ronnie, you look so fine, you look so fine. And you help me, Ronnie.
Berry, ladies and gentlemen. Jan Berry. To a white courtesy phone. Jan Berry.
He's there too.
I guess we'll have to wait for the Jan and Dean reunion till rock and roll heaven. Oh, sorry, Dean. I mean, not anytime soon, of course.
Oh, okay. Any requests? Eric, what do you want to hear? Let's hear Surf City. What makes you think we would know that? Okay, where does, what? Hold on. Wait. Wait a minute. Where's Cerulli? Where's Don Cerulli?
Security, take this man away.
See over there? Cerulli, where are you?
Where's Don Cerulli?
You think I'm drunk?
I think Dean wants to collect his check.
How'd you like that? Huh. John Depp?
Hey, little respect.
Hey, Robbie.
A little respect, people. A little respect.
This guy sings that almost as good as Jan. Almost. See, I don't want to sing Jan's part because I don't get to sing in my own part. Jim Rush just reminded me that 26 years ago, swear to God, this very room, Jan and Dean and Papa Duran played up here for the first and last time. No, I think we played one more time. Okay. And they charged us for the food. So, Lou, you owe us lunch, I think, after all this. Oh, there's some pictures from just to prove we were. Well, how do we know it? Well, how do we know that that's...
We're not in the picture, which is usual.
Well, you know, I mean, those things happen when...
Right next to the
when you're
puppet
just
show.
a backup band.
Papa Duran.
Okay, any other requests here? That's too hard. Nothing too hard. It's Sunday, you know, for God's sake. Popsicle. We got a little old lady here, a little old lady request. Okay, we can have a little old lady, I think. Should we try that? Will that make you happy? Okay. As I said, nothing too complicated. Okay, you got a little crush. 26 years ago, my goodness. Just get up here. Man, this is like a hootenanny. Except I don't know if we know what hootenanny is. But if we did know what a hootenanny was, this would be it. Skunk Jeff Baxter joined us. My favorite organ player, Paul Freeman. Well, I don't know anybody else that plays one. Okay, I'm sorry, I meant an accordion. I don't know one from the other. Skunk loves surf instrumentals, right? So we should probably do one of those. Where's Badfingers? Okay, come on up. For those of you that haven't experienced the weird world of Bobby Badfingers, you are about to wander into that world. And some guys are going to wander out of that world. Jim Shippey, hey, look at that. The guys that were right here. Not much has changed in 26 years. We always knew to spend more time talking and screwing around, so at least they couldn't pan the music. Okay, oh, Barbie, okay. How many here have watched American Idol? And will admit to it? I do. Okay. Bobby just had a commercial on for Yahoo. You may have seen him in his commercial. So anyway, I think they're ready for you, Bobby. Maybe. Are you folks ready? Okay, now, please do not try this at home. Only a professional can do this. And never do this in front of kids, if you gotta do it. And don't do it in front of kids, because you'll scare them too as well. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, bitches, Bobby Badfinger. What can you say? I think it's best we just don't say anything, right? Sterling Smith on keyboards. Every time I look over this, somebody that I don't remember. Freebird? Any other requests? Barbara Ann? Holy Barbara Ann. I know, that's a pretty difficult song to do. Get on out here, Barbara Ann. I think okay. It's Paul's favorite song, so I guess we gotta do it. is about to become an acoustic set. Skunk room that got up here and turned it off. I didn't turn it off. I love to hear it play. Oh, it's weird. You gotta actually press the button that says on or only one problem, we don't know the words and nobody can sing it. Other than that, it sounded good for a minute. We're still trying to figure out what happened to the keyboard. We never needed a keyboard anyway. Yeah. I mean, you shouldn't need all that many instruments for Barbara Ann. It isn't exactly a, technologically hey, Shippy.
Crazy Jim Chippy, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh my God.
How do we do it, Chief?
It's not going to matter what key it is, believe me. difficult to me. Somebody want? Oh, that's Jan's aunt. Wants to hear Linda. And this is actually. Hey, I like that. Oh, whoa, Holly, you're down there. I told you we should do it. Look at this. What the hell? Call a musician, please. Actually, we did have a request over here for Beach Studio School. Anybody want to attempt that? Would that be fun to do, Beach Studio School? I think that could be fun. Okay. Honeys, where are you? We need honey for the Beach Studio School stuff. Keep singing this. You can never have enough trouble, you know? Well, yes you can, but you don't want to. That was tailor-made for you. Okay, are we about ready? Now we have Bobby Figueroa from the Beach Boys on the pass. guitarists up here, and they want to try another music, something or other. So want to try that? I don't know what they're going to do, but I'll like it. Hey, Skunk, you don't have to tune it. They'll never tuned it. It's good enough for him. Okay, do whatever makes you happy. we should thank Katie Berry and Sayar for all the we certainly appreciate it. We had some both these guys we'll do one more. We want to hear everybody sing along here. This is all a celebration. Jan would want to sing this Sahara. We already did Surf City, so we got to do Surf USA too, you know. Equal time, I think they call it. They do want to see the check for. Oh, you say it. Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. Okay. Okay. Again, this is a guitar song. Hi, Matt. Oh, good. Somebody covered some falsettos. Matt Jardine, everybody, right up there. appreciate having this place to have this great party. Hope you all had a good time, and we'll just come out and yak and mingle and catch up on more old stories.